All right, let's begin. And let's be very clear from the start. This is not a forecast. This is an autopsy. The year is 2026. The subject on the table is the global system itself. Our job here is to pinpoint the structural fractures, identify the strategic choke points, and understand the deep-seated conditions that are defining this new era of asymmetric warfare. I want you to think of the global order as a living body. For decades, it had a steady pulse, a rhythm of interdependence. But now, it's showing clear signs of systemic shock. Our examination today is going to cut right through the noise, the market chatter, the political theater, to find the real hairline cracks and deep fissures threatening the entire organism. So, we begin our autopsy with the first major anomaly. This is a market phenomenon that seems to be defying the laws of economic gravity. It's a sector that has completely decoupled from the normal business cycle and has, in fact, become the primary battlefield for geopolitical conflict. I'm talking, of course, about the semiconductor industry. Just look at that number, $1 trillion. The scale here is absolutely staggering. We're not talking about just a market anymore. This is the literal foundation of modern civilization. Silicon is the new oil, and the relentless, non-negotiable demand for it is rewriting the global balance of power. So the question is, what on earth is fueling this unprecedented explosion? Well, it's a radical leap in technology. We are in the middle of a transition away from generative AI, systems that respond to our commands, to what's being called agentic AI. These are autonomous systems. They can plan, reason, and execute complex tasks all on their own. And the critical point here, the thing you have to understand, is the processing power they need. The demand isn't just growing, it's growing exponentially. It's creating a supply crisis so intense that it's isolating this entire industry from the rest of the global economy. And this slide right here reveals the new geography of power. 3 companies have become the planet's most critical strategic choke points. You have NVIDIA, which controls the design architecture for training all this AI. Then there's TSMC, the only foundry on Earth that can actually produce the vital 2-nanometer chips. And finally, ASML, which holds an absolute monopoly on the high-tech lithography tools needed to print these microscopic circuits. These aren't just companies anymore. They are the gatekeepers of industrial power. Now, when you have that much power concentrated in the hands of a few corporations, it triggers a massive reaction from governments. And that reaction is called sovereign AI. Nations are just not willing to outsource their core computational infrastructure anymore. They are scrambling to build their own domestic AI clusters, which creates this huge second wave of demand that has nothing to do with consumer trends. This is purely about national security. It's an arms race, and the ammunition is silicon. This tech arms race isn't just happening in a vacuum. It's being met with a very calculated, state-level strategic response. So for our second section, we're going to examine the master plan being drawn up right now in Beijing, China's 15th five-year plan. The entire plan boils down to one core concept: technical autarky. Now, this isn't just about catching up anymore. This is about fundamentally rewiring their national strategy, pulling away from global interdependence and moving towards total self-reliance. It's a direct answer to years of U.S. export controls. In this quote, this is really the key to their entire way of thinking. From Beijing's point of view, when the world gets volatile, the answer isn't to lash out, no. The answer is to turn inward, to consolidate, to build a self-contained system that can withstand any external shock. It's a defensive strategy, born from a feeling of being strategically surrounded. So, here's how they plan to do it. These are the operational pillars. First, modernize the existing industrial base. Second, achieve what they call decisive breakthroughs in those key choke point technologies, semiconductors, AI, you name it. Third, strengthen their own domestic market to act as a buffer. And finally, fuse economic and national security into one single goal. This is a comprehensive plan for a very contested world. But every system, every grand plan, has a potential point of failure. In our autopsy, this is the critical stress fracture. It's an internal vulnerability so deep, so profound, it could make that entire strategic plan completely irrelevant. We're calling it the demographic kill switch. And our first piece of evidence is the single data point. For the first time in 30 years, China is putting a value-added tax on contraceptives. Now, this is not a fiscal policy. This is a signal from the state. It represents a fundamental shift in policy, away from trying to incentivize people and towards coercion. You see, the critical thing to understand here is that the carrot approach has already failed. They've tried nationwide subsidies, expanded healthcare,
None of it has reversed the trend. So now we're seeing the stick come out. This tax is mostly symbolic, sure, but when you combine it with reports of officials monitoring women's childbearing plans, you start to see a picture of real desperation at the highest levels of government.
And this is why they're so desperate. This is the stark reality they are facing. The population is in free fall. The birth rate has absolutely cratered. This isn't just a slowdown. By any clinical definition, this is a demographic collapse. And it is the single greatest long-term threat to all of China's economic ambitions and its ability to project power. So as all these pressures build up here on Earth, the great power competition is starting to project outward and upward into a totally new domain, a new frontline where controlling resources is just as critical, the high frontier of space. And 2026 is the pivotal year. In February, you have NASA's Artemis II, which will be humanity's first trip back to the moon's vicinity since 1972, a hugely symbolic mission. But just 6 months later, China's Chang'e 7 launches with a much more practical goal: to land at the lunar South Pole and set up a permanent robotic base in a region that's believed to have massive deposits of water ice, the key resource for any future space economy. When you put these two missions side by side, you see two completely competing philosophies at play. Artemis is a coalition. It's a big show of international partnership that's meant to set the rules for peaceful exploration. Chang'e, on the other hand, is a foothold. It is a unilateral, state-driven play to seize strategic real estate, control resources, and lay the groundwork for a future crewed base. One is about setting the rules of the road, the other is about owning the destination.
And that brings us to our final assessment. We've looked at the technological, the strategic, and the demographic systems at play. Now it's time to deliver the final results of our systemic autopsy.
So here's the summary. The US-led bloc's core asset is its near-total innovation hegemony. They control the choke points of the silicon supply chain. But its fatal vulnerability is that exact same supply chain. It is fragile, it's overextended, and it's incredibly susceptible to geopolitical shocks. Its trajectory, we assess, is one of managed decline. As for China, its core asset is its unmatched industrial scale and the power of state control. But its fatal vulnerability is that demographic kill switch. So its trajectory is that of a rising contender, yes, but one that is racing against an existential clock. And so we close our autopsy with one single critical question. In this new era of asymmetric warfare, which vulnerability is going to prove more fatal? Is it the innovator's deep dependence on a fragile globalized system, or is it the rising manufacturer's battle against its own demographic decay? The answer to that question will define the next decade.